Good morning. Thank you so much for joining me here today. Okay, I keep getting asked what the difference is between a traditional school, such as a parochial school or your local public school, and a Montessori school. And my mom recently pointed something out that I thought was really interesting. She said that the public schools keep changing their curriculum every year in order to accommodate the changes that are happening with the national core curriculum. And they keep trying to accommodate testing and things like that. And one of her friends who's a Montessorian said, Montessori is not changing, which is true. Because we have our albums and we have our lessons and it works. And so I thought that was interesting because, if you have a child, you may not know, if you have a child who comes out of a Montessori program, more often than not, they excel in the public school and they test above and beyond the standards, the state standards. So, without further ado, I will get into the differences between a traditional classroom setting and a Montessori school. In a traditional school, they have the same age groups. Occasionally, you will see something called looping, which is like first and second grade together or third and fourth grade together. Because when a teacher graduates from a university with their teaching certificate, they are certified to teach kindergarten through sixth grade and sometimes kindergarten through eighth grade. So looping is something that has been around for a while and it's becoming a little bit more popular. And I like the idea because the children get to stay with the same teacher. And whenever you have a child who stays in the same setting, with the same friends and the same teacher, the same students, they tend to be more successful than if they're moved around and there's a lot of changes going on. So, for instance, you would have in a traditional school all of the kindergartners in one classroom, all of the first graders in one classroom. Whereas in a Montessori school, you're going to have an authentic Montessori program, I should clarify, because there are some Montessori schools out there, some schools who use the name Montessori because it's in public domain, and then they have a kindergarten classroom or a first grade classroom. So that's why I always encourage parents, teachers, I always encourage everyone to go and observe to see what the school is about. So you will see that, unfortunately. And in an authentic Montessori community, you will have mixed age groups where 3 to 6 year olds are in one primary classroom, for example, 6 to 12-year-olds, or a lot of Montessori schools do 6 to 9 and 9 to 12, and then 12 to 15 or 12 to 18. There's an amazing school that I highly recommend you look at if you're here in Arizona. It's called CREO Montessori School, and it's actually just called CREO. It's located in Gilbert. And they have a Nido classroom, which is my favorite for those of you who know me. Nido is the infancy classroom. It starts at 6 weeks. And they start at Nido and they go all the way up to 9th grade. And they're growing their 9th grade to 12th grade at their farm campus. So they have 2 different campuses. And they have an authentic program with multi-age classrooms. So if you're here in Arizona, if you're in the valley, go and see CREO Montessori. It's amazing. It's really beautiful to watch Montessori taking place in such a way that makes you feel good about the children, and they're working hard to stay true to the method. So when there's so many Montessortas or Montesomethings out there, it's refreshing to see an authentic community. In a traditional school, students are expected to sit at assigned desks or tables. So when I was in public school, because I was in public school from 3rd through 6th grade, at the school that was just closest to our house in our neighborhood, I'd already been in Montessori, so I was on the honors roll and the principals list. It was really easy for me to get good grades because of my Montessori foundation. But our teachers would let us sit wherever we wanted to in the beginning of the year sometimes. And then if something happened where we were, causing mischief or not listening to a lesson, then we would come in and all of a sudden our names would be on the desks and we would be expected to sit at our assigned desks. And then occasionally we would have a very strict teacher. Oh, she was a character. Mrs. Han. She was in her 80s. And I really liked her. I really respected her because you knew what was expected of you. She was very clear on what how you were to behave in her classroom. She was strict. She reminded me of the nuns in Catholic school. But anyhow, she started us off with assigned seats, and then we could work diligently toward earning sitting where we wanted to as a group in the class. So by the end of the year, we all got to choose our own seats. And I liked that because I was like, okay, so you start out strict and then you kind of, loosen the reins, which that was, we had something to work towards. Okay, so in a Montessori classroom, so in the traditional school, you've got sometimes assigned seats or assigned desks. And then in a Montessori classroom, the students choose where in the classroom they want to work, and they move around freely at any time because, especially in the 3 to 6 room, in the 3 to 6-year-old classroom, movement is one of the human tendencies. So the children thrive in an environment where they have the freedom to go outside. You have an assistant and you help, and a group of children can work outside and they can run and they can dance and they can play music, and they have the freedom to follow that inner light inside of them, and it's beautiful to watch. And then in the 6 to 12-year-old classroom, they're going to start great work, what's called great work, and they need lots of room to be able to do these great lessons. And for instance, in Montessori Madness, an 8-year-old little girl was doing a division problem, and she just kept adding numbers to it, and the teacher ran and got some more paper, and before you knew it, she was into the billions and trillions, and the paper went all the way down the wall and onto the floor. It's beautiful to watch. Some other examples of great work that I've seen within the classroom are the bead material. The children love math, and that's similar to the division problem in Trevor Eisler's Montessori Madness. But the children will lay out the beads. Even the 5 and 6-year-olds will lay out the 1,000 chain and label it, and then they'll stop at the last label and look at it and think, well, I want to go to 10,000. And so they'll take the chain and just take it along the hallway outside of the classroom. And before you know it, the entire hallway is labeled with all of these numbers, and it's really beautiful to watch. But if you're a Montessori teacher and you have seen some great work, please feel free to comment on this video and share your great work with us. I would love to hear about it. There are so many amazing examples of great work, especially like in science and geography, and animal classification is a wonderful lesson where great work can take place, because the children can start out with something as simple as learning the names of the animals, and then learning the scientific names of the animals, and then getting into details such as the animal's habitat, where in the world does the animal live, what kind of food does the animal like to eat, and that's all part of that lesson. And then it gets into so much more detail, and the children can just take it and run with it. It's beautiful to watch. Okay, so in a Montessori classroom, the children can work on a rug on the floor, the children can sit at a table, the children can work outside, the children can work in the hallway, the children can choose where they want to work. And they're encouraged to do so because you want to build that concentration, that beautiful concentration. Let's see here. And then in a traditional classroom, you're going to have a certain block of time allotted for each subject, and all the students work on the same subject at the same time. I have seen in traditional classrooms with the textbooks where if a child is in the gifted program, for instance, or they're just moving ahead of the class, then the teacher will go to, here's the mess. Okay, there we go. The teacher will go to the extra effort of getting a textbook that's more advanced for that child, and then they will work at the back of the classroom and move forward. But usually that's, one single child, maybe two, who are moving ahead. There is a private school here in Prescott called Primavera. Primavera is, they focus on workbooks, and the children can go ahead, and children who are behind have the freedom to catch up. And it's they have these packets of paper, so they use a whole lot of paper, and the children work at their own pace, and it's beautiful to watch. It's not Montessori, but it's nice to see that children can choose to excel if they want to, because if given the opportunity, most children will just go ahead. They love it. So you remember if you were in public school, the teacher would say, okay, it's time for math. And then they would spend 50 minutes on math. And then it's time for language. And then they would spend 50 minutes on language. So in Montessori, we have what are called 3-hour work cycles. They're uninterrupted work cycles. And the students choose when and for how long to work on each activity that they've chosen based on the lessons they've received. And many subjects are integrated at the same time. So, for instance, when Loriana was in her 9 to 12 class, so she was in 4th grade, if you want to put her in a grade, but she was in the 9 to 12-year-old class at a Montessori school. She did a project on Hannah Montana. She did another project on tea roses, I think. Yeah, in Hannah Montana. So it was a lot of project-based learning. She chose that. That's what she wanted her topic to be. And she talked about the history of, tell me her real name, Miley Cyrus. The history of Miley Cyrus. This was back when Miley was still doing some Disney work. It was a long time ago. It was literally like 15 years ago, 14, 15 years ago. And she talked about how many record sales she had. She talked about how much money she's made. She talked about her different sources of revenue, how much her income has grown over the years, and she compared one year to the next. So you've got math, you've got English, because she's writing a paper about Hannah. She's going into the history. She's doing a timeline on Hannah, on Miley Cyrus, and talking about what awards she had won, and how she had excelled in her career. So lots of different subjects are covered, and she's drawing pictures of Miley Cyrus and putting them on a poster board and creating a presentation for her children, for her, colleagues in her class, her peer group. And she's learning how to practice public speaking by presenting that to her friends. So it's beautiful to watch. Let's move on. In traditional classrooms, it's adult-centered. The teacher controls the classroom and enforces discipline. Usually the teacher has a desk in the classroom. You don't usually see a desk for the teacher in a Montessori classroom. And the teacher's standing in front of the class, right? And all the children are sitting in the desk below, and they're watching the teacher, right? In a Montessori classroom, it's child-centered. A carefully prepared environment encourages the students to practice self-discipline. And within that self-discipline, the children are working out resolutions to arguments they may be having. So let's say, for instance, when I was student teaching after my elementary training, within my elementary training, these 4 boys were sitting at this table. And this was really cute to watch. So they had the book of Confucius in front of them, and they were studying religions around the world, and they were talking about how religions are different depending on which country you're in. And one of the boys was very angry because he said that his family believes in Jesus Christ and no other gods shall go before him. And he was, trying to debate with these boys about Christianity in relation to Confucianism. And one of the boys said, it was so sweet. Well, I think it comes down to the golden rule. So we will respect, he was 9 years old. We will respect your belief in Jesus Christ. And if you want to sit down and talk with us, you're welcome to. We're exploring other religions right now. But it's your choice if you want to join us, because that's what the golden rule is about. 9 years old. It was so stinking cute. Oh my gosh. I was like, oh. It was beautiful to watch. So these are some of the conversations that go on in Montessori classrooms. And the Book of Confucius just happened to be one of they called them the keys of knowledge within the Montessori classroom. The director, the guide, the Montessori teacher had put that book next to the world's, the globes, and they had taken it off the shelf and started studying it, and they were writing about it, and it was really fascinating to watch. So I couldn't see this conversation happening in a traditional school classroom because it was very organic, and the children had the choice to sit together, and that other child had the choice to come up and say something and join them or walk away from them. And so you'll see in a Montessori classroom, a lot of the children are self-moderating. So if there is an argument or if something happens that escalates beyond their peer group, they will have a conversation about it later in the day with the teacher present, and the teacher will help them come to a harmonious agreement. Sometimes they vote on different things. I've seen Montessori classrooms where they have a government system set up, and the children will talk about putting the situation on trial and discussing what they feel the best outcome would be for the entire classroom. And it's beautiful because it gives them an opportunity to talk about our current government system and what it looks like. So they've got civics in the 6 to 12-year-old classroom. Okay. So please feel free to ask a Montessorian if you have any questions, and I would be happy to answer. Let's move on. So in a traditional classroom, they use worksheets, rote learning, and you'll see lots of textbooks, and lots of paper will be being used for workbooks and packets that they'll complete, because the teachers are given the state standards and they're given a copy of the test, for instance, and then they're expected to figure out how to help the children master what's going to be on the test. So a lot of teaching to the test is happening in a traditional classroom. Whereas in a Montessori classroom, they use manipulatives, materials that appeal to the senses. It's purposeful, and they have real life experiences going on. For instance, some people call it the story of the universe. Depending on the school where you're at, they may call it God Who Has No Hands. In my training, we called it God Who Has No Hands, but we were given the freedom to change the name depending on our classroom and what makes the classroom community, the parents and the children, feel more comfortable. So some teachers changed it to the story of the universe. And in God Who Has No Hands, or the story of the universe, we have a large bowl, and it talks about how we came to live here on Earth. And it gets down to the scientific background of that story, the elements. And for instance, we show a volcano erupting, and we talk about how humans came to live on Earth, and how there was a drop that came. This drop had human DNA in it, and it grew to become an actual human being. And within that story, we use props, and we have a large bowl, and we take water and we put it in the bowl, and then we take styrofoam, little pieces of styrofoam, And we talk about how some elements come together and some elements move away from each other, just like us as humans. You will find that some people we love being around, and some people, for whatever reason, we move away from. And so it was beautiful this is taught to a 6-year-old. So it's beautiful to take that story and then have the children put together a science experiment that goes along with it. And that's part of the manipulatives. I will create another video on the story so that you can hear it and learn more about it. So stay tuned on YouTube on Ask a Montessorian, because it's a really amazing story. It's fascinating. So let's see here. So in a traditional classroom, they're going to be focusing on the product, and they're going to be using tests and grades. And the product, for example, would be whether or not the child passes the test, or whether or not they've mastered a particular concept that's going to be on the test, for instance. Whereas in a Montessori classroom, they're focusing on the process, and they don't often use tests or grades. We are opening a Montessori charter school here in Prescott, and because we are receiving state funding so that we can offer Montessori to children from all backgrounds, we will be required to perform state testing, and we use either a grade-based system or a number-based system. For instance, a 3 would be a C, something like that, because we're required to. And we talk to the children about it in advance, and we give them an idea of what the test is going to look like. A lot of Montessori schools use a program called Galileo, and it's a different form of testing, but it's a great opportunity for the children to understand there are different tests out there, and they're performed differently, and they cover different, pieces of information. So we like to present the idea of testing to the children as simply an experience. And there is not a lot of stress that week like you might see in a public school. It's more like this is just a stepping stone to go on to our next form of lessons, and we're going to learn about how to take a test. And most of the time the children do very well. It's beautiful to watch. Okay. And in the elementary Montessori classroom, they have something called cosmic education. So they start with the outside, like the earth, for example, and they work on the peripheral of the subject that you're learning about. And then the children dive deeper and deeper and deeper into the subject of their own accord. So they can choose how far they want to take it, or if they want to just learn about the basics of it and it doesn't quite light their fire. But we try and touch a little bit on everything with the peripheral, and that's why they call it cosmic. It's beautiful. And so you'll see that happening in an authentic elementary classroom. In a traditional school, you'll see an emphasis on competition. For instance, when children get their report cards, I know we did it when I was even in Catholic school. Our friends I'd go out to my girlfriends and we would share our report cards and say, oh, I got an A in his class. Oh, I got a B in her class. What did you get in her class? And that's the competition aspect of it, where you're competing for better grades and you're comparing yourself to the child next to you, your friends, for instance. Whereas in Montessori, there's an emphasis on collaboration, and you're usually inherently, because it's not talked about per se, but I inherently compared myself to yesterday's version of myself. So I was always trying to improve upon whatever it is I was studying when I was in Montessori, but I wasn't comparing myself to my peers, because I didn't, we didn't have report cards. We weren't there wasn't a lot of competition going on in the classroom. It really was focused on collaboration. And that brings us back to the government system, where we're teaching civics, and we set it up where we have a trial and like a mock jury, and we discuss a problem that we're having, and we want to come to a consensus within the classroom. And that's all about collaboration. We work together to create these beautiful projects within the classroom, and the children are the center of that, not the teacher, the children. In a traditional school, the teacher gives direct instruction to the whole class and to groups of students based on a predetermined curriculum, which is usually based on the test or the national core standards and what's expected on the tests. In a Montessori classroom, students independently use self-teaching materials. They learn from one another, and the teacher provides individualized lessons or small group lessons for the children. So in primary, with the 3 to 6-year-old, you will see a lot of individualized lessons, whereas gregariousness and socializing in the elementary classroom are so important. So we will do small group lessons with anywhere from 3 to 6 children participating at a time. In a traditional classroom, it's standards-based learning based on the test, or the core curriculum, which is based on the test. And then in a Montessori classroom, you will see inquiry-based learning. So as a Montessori directress, it is, or a Montessori guide, the teachers are called directors and directresses. It's our responsibility to perform observations and take detailed notes as we're giving lessons and as we're teaching throughout the classroom, so that if a child has already mastered something, we know that child is ready to move on to the next lesson. And the children will come up and say, I want to learn about non-decimal based numbers, because they see another child doing it and they get excited about it. So yeah, that's inquiry-based learning. And you follow the child in a Montessori classroom, and people think this is a chaotic concept, right? And they're like, well, I'm just going to follow my child. And recently one of my friends was telling me that people are walking their dogs outside, right? And they're following their dogs, or they're following their pets. Okay. I have to clarify here for a moment. It's not chaos because you're preparing the environment for the success of the child. If you have a well-prepared environment, you will have the freedom to follow the child, because you, as the teacher or the guide, director, you're controlling the environment by preparing it for the children. Therefore, the children are exposed to lessons that you have prepared for them. So you're following the child in a controlled environment. It's not like following the child out into the traffic when you're walking, Okay. So Montessori is very structured because of the concept of the prepared environment and the children receiving lessons. It's important to remember that. And it depends on which Montessori school you're observing, because the name Montessori is in public domain. Let's see here. Last but not least, in a traditional school, students are expected to be within the norms of what is average for their grade level. So if they want to work above and beyond, it's not always accommodated. If they're struggling, they may get an IEP, and they may get some more time to work on a test or whatnot. But if, let's say, a 3rd grader is doing 6th grade math and they come from a Montessori school, they may not. And they go into a traditional classroom, they may no longer be exposed to that level of math, unfortunately. Most public schools, and even, parochial schools, it's because the teacher is... Because it's teacher-based learning, the teacher only has so much time and energy that she can give to each child within that. That's why they teach them as a group and do the same subjects at the same time. So they don't have the specialized materials so that the children can excel at their own pace. So sometimes they'll go and get a textbook, like I mentioned before, and try and create opportunities for that child to continue, excelling, but that doesn't always happen. And then in a Montessori school, students have the opportunity to advance academically at their own pace, without limits. It's beautiful to watch, and it is our responsibility as guides, Montessori teachers, to prepare the environment according to the needs of each child. So if a child is passionate about astronomy, for example, we will make sure that we tweak the prepared environment. Like they ask a question during afternoon circle time, and then that evening we take the time to go to the library and get some keys of knowledge, some beautiful books on astronomy, and we prepare a lesson or two for that child that's based on astronomy, and we create a little area in the science area of the classroom. We already have astronomy going on in the Montessori classroom, but we tweak it maybe just a little bit so that child can go a little bit further into what it is he or she is studying. So with the information that is in the classroom. So that covers it. That is, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 differences. I'm sure you guys could think of many more if given the opportunity, but 10 differences between a traditional classroom and a Montessori classroom. Please feel free to ask a Montessorian, and as my son likes to remind me, I'm supposed to say click like and subscribe if you liked this video and you'd like to see more information on Montessori. Thank you so much for joining me here, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.